really excited to talk to you about the work you do at Hug with Randi Zuckerberg, creating more inclusive spaces for digital artists through NFTs and blockchain technologies. But first, I wanted to talk to you about how you ended up building Web3 communities. So, as a journalist personally covering this space, I found that nearly every leading voice in Web3 sort of just stumbled into Web3 by accident. But even then, I think your journey is a really interesting one. So, uh, as I understand it, as a social linguist, you were using comics to teach English to refugees. Then, as a healthcare communicator, you were creating content around pharmaceuticals and ocular anatomy. So, at first, I was a little surprised how the heck you wound up championing blockchain in digital arts. But actually, it makes perfect sense now that I think about it for someone who spent their career finding creative channels to connect with different audiences, teaching difficult, highly technical concepts in engaging ways. So I just kind of want to throw it to you, like, how do you frame your journey to Web3?
Well, so the story I tell when I'm talking at Hug, and I teach a lot of marketing workshops there as a marketing manager for them, where I like to teach artists how they can use social media to market their work and sell their goods. A big part of that lesson I share is how being Filipino has really informed my professional journey from the start. My mom, she immigrated to the US during the 80s. She's from Mabolo, Cebu. She met my father here in the States. And so growing up, my father was in the Air Force. And we actually moved frequently, like every 3 years, following him wherever his airplane went. And so I spent most of my life growing up in England and Japan, and then we eventually came to the American Midwest. But every time we moved, every 3 years, my mom, she knew that she couldn't do anything without community supporting her. And I think that's very Filipino of her to acknowledge I have my strengths, but I can't do everything alone. And that's really a lesson I've learned being Filipino-American. So whenever we moved somewhere new, the very first thing she would do is she'd start acting on how do I build my community? I'm here. I don't know anybody. I don't know anything. And so, and this is something that's, I feel, universal to all Filipinos, is that she would go out like to the grocery store, to the mall, anywhere that there were people, and she would find people who looked Asian or Filipino. And she'd be like, okay, you're coming to my house. I'm having a big party. I'm going to cook a bunch of food. We're going to sing karaoke and we're all going to hang out. And then within 2 weeks after having one big party, overnight we'd have this big community. And this happened, every couple years where, we'd move, we have nobody. And then all of a sudden I had friends at school before I even started classes. My mom had, I had a whole new catalog of ates and titas and titos who I'd never met, but now they were coming in, they were babysitting me. My mom was trading babysitting with them. And so very Filipino way to be like, I don't know anybody, but I'm going to leave this situation. I'm going to know everybody here. Some people are like, how did you get into community building? Very much community building has just, that's what Filipinos do. We're everywhere and we love connecting, we love building. And so it's just been very organic. It's just my second nature. Like it's not really a professional skill. It's just my state of being. And on that note of being Filipino, I grew up moving from England to Japan, have an American father, Filipino mother. She speaks Visayan and then goes between that and Tagalog. So very much right away, I understood like, depending on the language you're speaking, you're going to behave and act differently. And that's reflected on like, not just like when you're at home speaking to my mother and then my father, but then I go to school and you speak differently to your teacher. So all of these situations drew me to sociolinguistics, which is really the study of how does language inform not just our social connections, but our perceptions of the world. My mom, having Filipino culture, viewed certain situations very different than my American father. So that's what drew me to sociolinguistics. And through my kind of wacky little career, from teaching refugees to working in medicine to now working in blockchain, sociolinguistics has informed that because no matter where we are, communication is what shapes us. So like, working with sociolinguistics, just I started off in refugee work teaching ESL. I tried to learn other languages and I was actually really bad at learning languages. And after like being in university and trying really hard I did like 8 years of Spanish, 6 years of Japanese, 4 years of Latin. My mom desperately tried to teach me Tagalog and Visayan and nothing stuck. but I became really good at just like analyzing languages, even if I was bad at speaking different ones. I didn't have that innate Filipino talent that so many do in the homeland. But that taught me to like understand English really well in the social situation. So when I was working with refugees, this is something like I picked up working with my mom growing up and like translating like higher level English things to her since she speaks like 5 languages and I speak one. Um, was like comics are really useful in teaching English, and it's something actually translates really well to marketing because no matter what we're doing, is we're not just reading text as we're operating through the world. When we're watching TV, when we're looking at ads, billboards, commercials, everything is a combination of visual and textual language. And so the decisions we make with colors, shapes, the way words flow across the screen, we see this in comic books, and it's a really fun way to learn stories, to learn language, but also it's very innate in our behavior in general. So whereas an ad is just like a static image, you know, it's one page, it's one banner, or maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's a TikTok video. There's a lot of visual and textual language going on there. With a comic book, you get a little more time with that story. And so you're able to weave through different concepts, work on language, work on past tense, present tense, future tense. And so I actually had a lot of fun using comic books in this educational setting. The population I worked with was Korean refugees from Southeast Asia. And it was actually really interesting because even though I didn't speak their native language of Korean, they had a lot of linguistic similarities with Filipinos. So working with like the muscles in the mouth and the throat, it was much easier to teach them English because I knew in Tagalog and Visayan, you know, our tongue moves a certain way, our throat moves a certain way, and they had a lot of commonality with that. And so kind of taking both my personal experience with being Filipino and hanging out with my mom and just listening to her talk and kind of like, no, that's that's not how we say it in English. You know, the F's and P's in Filipino are very different than American English. I took those kind of same lessons. I was able to translate them into a completely different cultural family to help people learn English, pass citizenship tests, get jobs. But with that, it was nonprofit. It was refugee outreach. And it wasn't paying the bills. I had like 5 roommates, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. In a very classic Filipino fashion, what field did I turn to? I turned to healthcare. It's like you have to, I feel like if you're Filipino, a lot of us have to wear scrubs at some point. So I kind of fell into that stereotype, and I actually was working in ophthalmology and clinical research for 12 years, pretty much right after college when the refugee nonprofit track wasn't working out as well. But with that, like those very innate like Filipino skills of talking to different communities, of connecting with people on a social and language level, and then taking very high level technical concepts and translating them into simple terms, that was exactly what I did in medicine. And so a lot of that commonality with kind of translating those technical concepts in medicine very much matches what people do in tech and blockchain and Web3, these very difficult technical concepts, and just making it easy to understand for everyone to go like, oh, it's really not that crazy. I really understand that. And I loved working in medicine, but it was not the most creative field. I was able to be creative, like workflows and how do I make things more efficient? How do I make things more orderly? How do I make things more understandable? So there was creativity to that. But it just wasn't my jam. But even though I was really good at it, I think it was really hard to, I think anyone who changes careers, they can accept like I can be amazing at this job and I can be really good and I can be the best one at it. And I was working at this amazing practice in New York City, but it wasn't making me happy. And the straw on the camel's back was when COVID happened. And so all of a sudden, I'm living in New York City. Everyone's shutting down, and I'm still going to work. I wasn't working on the front line with COVID patients necessarily, but I still had to be there and kind of navigate this chaotic system of if someone I was working in an eye practice, if someone had an eye emergency and needed to get eye surgery, all the surgery centers were closed because of COVID. All the hospitals were shut down. I stopped taking the train to work. I started riding my bike every day in New York City from my apartment to my clinic. And on that bike ride, there was a pop-up morgue during COVID, like on Park Avenue outside the hospital. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think this is my push to find like more creative work. This is fulfilling, but this is not the place I want to be. And what's really interesting, I think a lot of Filipinos had that realization. I can't remember the statistic, but in the US, we have a vast number of Filipino nurses, and I think a majority of the nurses who passed away during the COVID pandemic were Filipino. It's like a stark percentage. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like over 75 or something crazy like that. And so it's like I'm living with these, like, you know, not just like being in healthcare, being in New York City, but then also the very real reality of Filipinos and Filipinos-Americans who are working in the healthcare sector, not just in America, but across the world. One of our main targets of overseas foreign workers. So at that point, I saved my money. It took a few months, waited to get vaccinated, and eventually I made the move to go into pharmaceutical marketing, which I was able to transfer very easily with, you know, my sociolinguistics expertise, and my healthcare background. It was hard. I think I applied to over 500 jobs and
Wow.
was unemployed for like 4 months. But I was willing to start at the bottom. I was willing to like work my way back up. Eventually, I got a job at an agency focused on cancer and biotechnology, where we were actually working on like chemotherapy, but localized, so that someone wouldn't have to go through like a whole system of chemo, but it could just be targeted to wherever their cancer was. I was very happy there, and this is like this is about 2 years ago now. And I was working great agency, really creative people. I was like feeling very fulfilled, like helping people get cancer treatment and like not have their lives completely upended. But that was around the same time I found out about NFTs. And I had just started dating my now fiance, and he was like, "Do you know what an NFT is? Have you heard of these?" And I was like, "I absolutely do not know what you're talking about." But he was very excited. And as I went deeper and deeper, I learned that it had this thriving arts ecosystem, where all of a sudden NFTs allowed artists to verify and validate their work. And that to me was extremely fascinating because I'm in my 30s, I'm a millennial. I grew up in the era of the internet, and artists being able to take credit for their own work has always been a challenge with technology. People have their art stolen all the time, every day, since the internet has existed. Like, art was probably getting stolen before then, but it's been massive with the internet. And then, kind of at that same time, as I'm finding out about this amazing arts ecosystem where artists can validate their work using blockchain technology and prove with code, hey, this is my art. This is the date I made it. This is my official account. All this wonderful certification validation with art. At that same time, I was reading articles and seeing more and more news about Filipinos, of all people, really rising in these play to earn blockchain games. And I think what really excited me about that concept is that overseas foreign workers represent a huge population of the Philippines who have to leave their families, who have to send money home. And it's a big sacrifice they make. It's a sacrifice my mother made when she was in her 20s. Growing up, like, we sent money home to the Philippines every paycheck my parents got. We had a balikbayan once a month, where like this big box sat in our house, and we'd go to the store, and that box would fill up with things over the course of the month. We would send that box over to Cebu and Leyte, where my family lives. And that was just how it went. We sent money and gifts and clothes every month. With the idea of blockchain and how Filipinos are rising in literally every part of the ecosystem, which makes me really excited about Philippine Blockchain Week, is that now there's potential for Filipinos to not leave their families. You know, I'm seeing the next generation, and I'm hoping that the next generation of Filipinos will not have to make the sacrifices that Filipinos today, Filipinos of our parents and grandparents, even farther back generations, had to make. We've long been a civilization of global trade, even before you know, Americans came around, even before the Europeans came around. We've long been a people of, you know, getting on the oceans, meeting with leaders in India and Indonesia, just going everywhere. The idea that we are such a strong community-driven people who care so deeply about our family, that we are individualistic in the way that many Westerners are. We have such a stronger emphasis on community, that like, love my American family, but the dynamic is just very different than a Filipino family. There's so much more interconnectedness. So the idea of blockchain really empowering Filipinos to not just earn a living, but to do it with their family, to do it in their home, to do it in their home country, that is really exciting for me. So I'm learning about these things and how we can uplift these unseen, not just Filipinos, but marginalized communities of all kinds, how we can empower artists. And I just started freelancing at one job. I got really excited. I freelanced another. Soon I was like working part-time for 5 different agencies. And it was around that time. I'm still full-time in pharmaceutical marketing. I'm just like having fun and doing stuff. I'm just like, yeah, let's do consulting. Let's have a lot of fun. It was around that time that Randi Zuckerberg and her co-founder Debbie Soon, who I now work for at Hug, saw the work I was doing. I was just all over the place because I was so excited about how great this new arts ecosystem was. And they're like, hey, come work for us. We think you're really talented. We think you're really cool. I was pretty active with a lot of the artists in the community already, friends with people who are on their team. But I'll be honest, like I'm an immigrant kid. Like, we grew up like working class, every extra penny we had growing up did go home to the Philippines. So like we didn't have a lot of liberty. So I always like to play it safe when it comes to these big changes. So with crypto, there's a lot of risk. You see scams all the time. You see companies come up and come down. So I was really trying to be careful with any kind of career change. It wasn't that long ago at this time where I was unemployed for 4 months to try and get a stable job in pharmaceuticals, which is a very like recession-proof industry because people always need medicine. So I was like, if I'm going to leave my recession-proof job, it needs to be for the right company, and it needs to be what I feel is a low-risk decision. Like everything's going to have risk, but I wanted to join a company that I felt was a sure bet and was doing the right thing. And I really got that impression with Hug, and it's really interesting because their co-founder Debbie Soon, who's now such a good friend, when I started freelancing with them, she really wanted to bring me on, and she could tell I was hesitant because I did love my pharmaceutical marketing job, and I loved from the situation I had where I was freelancing and kind of non-committal. And she was like, okay, listen, if you're non-committal, here's what we can do. She said we could date, where we agreed we would date like professionally. I would freelance with them, and they would work with me. I think it was like for 6 weeks. So we dated for 6 weeks. And then at the end of the term, because we were friends outside of work, she was like, if either of us aren't into it after 6 weeks, we will break up on good terms. We'll part ways. We'll still be buds. But after the 6 weeks was done, that was a year ago this month. I stayed on. I had a lot of fun. It was a sure bet. The work they were doing to empower artists was something I was really excited about. It was very early in the company. The company was founded in February 2022. So this is summer 2022, just a few months after that Randi had started it. And so a lot of what we were doing with the brand was still very new. And so it was exciting to come into something new with pharma. We're working with government, we're working with legal compliance. Nothing moves fast. There's a lot of red tape, which is very good. When it comes to medicine, you want the red tape, you want things to be safe. But blockchain and Web3 are really a wild, wild west with all of that. So whenever I came on, like pretty much right away, we hit the ground running. We're a small, nimble team. And what's really exciting is that, well, I'm the only Filipino. We have a lot of people of color, immigrant kids, immigrants on the team who really take a personal investment in empowering artists of every single background. And it's been a wonderful year. So kind of circling back to the beginning of my Web3 journey, a big part of it from the start has been my personal and professional relationship to my Filipino culture and how it's informed my whole life up until now. It decided my college major. It decided my first career as a teacher, my second career in medicine, my third career in blockchain. This constant state of reinvention of just being willing to be brave and do the crazy thing. That's very Filipino, just impulsive. Let's go. Let's see what happens. Figure it out along the way. We're very creative. I get that all from my mom. And Filipino culture, and then the role we had in blockchain. And so whenever I found out about Philippine Blockchain Week, I was immediately excited. I think I started talking to Cheska around the time of VCon and was just like, hey, we should be friends. I see just a lot of commonality and a lot of excitement. We have shared missions of really broadcasting the power of Filipinos in this space, because something I truly believe is, as far as the global stage is concerned, we've always been underestimated, but we are just absolutely dominating this field, and we should be loud and proud about it. And I feel like Philippine Blockchain Week is providing the platform to be loud and proud, to get on that global stage and say, hey, we're already leaders. We don't have to prove it to you. We're doing this. We're in charge. You just need to catch up and get on our level, catch up to speed. And I feel really excited to be collaborating with Philippine Blockchain Week through my work at Hug. It really feels like a culmination of just kind of my whole identity, which is really gooey, but it's such a pleasure.
I think that's amazing. And what an amazing way to frame that journey. Congratulations on this full circle kind of moment. It must be incredibly exciting. And it's funny how so much happens in a year. Like a year ago, I mean, I was barely getting my feet wet in Web3, and then now it's an incredibly vibrant community. And you're right, the Philippines is one of the epicenters of that global movement. And I wanted to ask you now, maybe diving, excuse me, a little deeper into your work, building communities in this space. So you've been responsible for launching and growing a number of communities now. In the case of Ladybirds, for example, which is a really organic movement with a clear purpose, right? Helping women and non-binary individuals in the Moonbirds community meaningfully connect. Then you have FOMO Party, and now, of course, you now that you're, excuse me, fully committed to Hug, what makes building a community in the Web3 space unique?
So when I look at building communities in general, and it is a lot easier in Web3, I'll give that a little bit. A question I always ask myself is, what do I want and how can I give it to other people? Kind of goes back to my mother. Whenever we moved every 3 years, she wanted, community support to help raise her children. So she would say, what do I want? How do I give it to other people? So she knew that if she wanted a community to help her raise her children, my dad was on deployments, she needed to be able to give that to other people. And growing up, like I think in high school was the first time I started building communities. I just loved local music and local concerts. And so I started like local music fan clubs because I was like, if I know I want this, other people have to want it. There's no way in the world I'm the only person. And so when I got to Web3, it's really interesting because Web3, when I first entered about a year or two ago, I saw a lot of commonality with like the early internet when we were just like making blogs and making Facebook groups and kind of making all these like, GeoCities pages. Like it's very ragtag and kind of chaotic. And just everyone kind of running around in an insane fashion. And someone just needs to come in and be like, hey, I'm doing a thing. If you're into it, come with me. And so like you mentioned FOMO Party. FOMO Party is a artist and community builders collective that me and my friends accidentally started. FOMO, for the uninitiated, stands for fear of missing out. And so the whole premise of FOMO Party, those were my first communities in Web3 that I started, was we were talking about how we kept missing out on all these exciting things in Web3, from like art drops to investment opportunities, to just feel like we're being late to everything. But kind of along the way, we realized like we would commiserate and complain together, like, oh, I can't believe we missed this, like, or I don't have that much money, I can never afford it. And we realized like we were all relating on the fear of missing out together, and said, well, we've really turned this into a party, and like at the end of the day, what matters more, finding your people or like buying a thing? And obviously it's finding your people. There's so much more, sentimental value, emotional value trumps financial value every day for me. And so that was kind of my first organic community where it's like, I just want to connect with people who feel like they're left out just the same. And it turned into this amazing community that we're still very active to this day. We provide like personal and professional support. A lot of us, when we first started 2 years ago, we were not working Web3, and now a lot of us do. We all like support each other through these career transitions. So that's been a really fun journey in FOMO Party. With Moonbirds, Ladybirds, kind of in that same context, when the Moonbirds event happened, I was lucky to win a raffle. I didn't think I was going to. Sometimes you just get lucky. And I noticed right away, like, just going in these like discords and chats, and they were just moving too fast. You couldn't type, you couldn't keep up. I wasn't connecting with anybody. And so I asked myself that question, what do I want and how can I give it to other people? And so I said I wanted to connect with people like me. And so there's a couple big umbrellas you can decide when you're doing that. Common ones for me is, Filipino communities. I've sought out a lot of different Filipino communities throughout my life. Like when I moved to New York City, it's one of the first communities I sought to meet up with when I got here. So with Moonbirds, I said, okay, another big umbrella for me is I'm a woman. And so let's connect with women and non-binary people. So right away, I was like, hey, let's get all the women in the room, all the non-binary individuals, anyone who doesn't identify as a man, and make like a mini community, which now Moonbirds calls those sub-parliaments. A parliament is a gathering of owls. And that quickly started where we had this like micro community of women and non-binary individuals connecting who also just happened to own a Moonbird. And the Moonbirds Proof team has always been very supportive of it. Together, we've been able to host two two events, and like one of them, we had a we had a Ladybirds brunch for NFT NYC last year, and I remember I was very hesitant on how many people we should like accommodate for this brunch. I was like, maybe 10 people will come, maybe 20. I was like, but I think we should be very mindful that, you know, we don't know how many women are in the space. And they were offering to sponsor the event, and I wanted to be very respectful of it. And like, listen, I don't know how many people are going to come. So we booked a pretty small like venue at first, but then it sold out in like 10 seconds. Like if I didn't have a ticket reserved because I was helping plan the event, I would not be able to go. And so we're like, oh, okay, crap. It sold out in 10 seconds. We need to do bigger. And we ended up booking out the whole restaurant and the restaurant next to it because that's how many people wanted to come. And so there were hundreds of people who came to this women's brunch for Moonbirds and Proof. And it was really amazing. Like, wow, like, you know, when you're on the internet, you see people in chat rooms and you see handles and you see profile pictures. It's always really hard to quantify. And this is something that, you know, marketers notice all the time is followers don't necessarily equal engagement. And like, while you may have a certain number, we have a certain number, a metric of people online, that doesn't necessarily reflect how many people are actually there and how many people are going to actually show up. Like when you do event planning, something you account for is I may invite 100 people, but only a third may show up. So I need to budget for how many will actually come. So it's really exciting to kind of be proven wrong, to kind of go by these ordinary rules I've been doing for event planning and organizing before I was in Web3, before I was in these online communities where you always had to underestimate who is going to come, who is going to show up, who's going to be active. And I was just constantly always surprised. And it's kind of when I was doing FOMO Party and when I was doing Moonbirds, that's around that time that Debbie Soon and Randi Zuckerberg at Hug were like, okay, this girl over here, no one's hired her yet, and she's doing this absolutely insane stuff, planning these events and getting these online communities together, and even surprising herself apparently. And so like by the time I got to Hug, what they were doing was just so exciting to me because whenever we have a website, Hug is we're building a social marketplace for artists to sell digital and physical goods and connect with their collectors much more easily so they can get seen, shared, and celebrated in a way that they deserve. And, you know, this really spoke to me as far as like building communities with that brand and that message. Because being Filipino-American, because I'm mixed race, because my mom was an immigrant and I moved a lot, and I had to kind of go between like this very white American community, but then this also very Filipino community, and kind of be in and out of both at the same time and grow up and see like different socioeconomic conditions. Like my family in the US lived very differently than my family in the Philippines. And then me in the US, I live very differently than a lot of my peers who were from higher income brackets, whose parents worked fancier jobs than my family in the military did. And so there's a saying, I forget who says it, it's like, you have to be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's like, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can do anything. Like if you just work hard enough, then you'll succeed. And if you fail, it's because you didn't work hard enough. And I think that's a very American mindset. And a lot of Americans do practice that. And there are times where even I believe that too. But it hit me like when I was in college and studying sociolinguistics and seeing like how different people have different opportunities, and just the language you're born speaking can influence a lot of that. Like Filipinos, one reason why they are leaders in so many tech dominated spaces is because we do speak English, because English is a national language, because we do have that freedom to enter these, you know, very Western dominated spaces and make space for ourselves. So as far as like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and if you work hard enough, you can do anything. I realize that not everybody has bootstraps. Not everybody has boots. Not everybody has the same resources and opportunities that someone else may have. And what Hug is doing is we're trying to give people bootstraps who don't have them. We're trying to give people the boots so they can march their way up bigger mountains. So through a lot of what we do at Hug is our first feature, this was really exciting. We wanted to create a way for people to find artists they resonated with. So one of the first features we had was we would invite art collectors and art lovers and artists to share with us who they were following, who they were excited about, different creators, different businesses, and Web3 and NFTs. And we like collect this originally in this insane Notion document. It was just pure madness. Just hundreds of people going in one Notion doc and putting in their favorite artists and sharing information about them. And part of that information people would share is what kind of artist is like Tina, for example. So if I was going in this Notion doc and putting my information as an artist, I could say Tina is an Asian artist. Tina is a woman artist. Tina is also a poet. She works with words. And so if I ever wanted to go onto Hug and find an artist that is an Asian woman poet, I could go and find art from that kind of artist. If it's Black History Month in America and I want to buy art from Black artists, I can go onto Hug and I can type in Black artists and it'll show me all the artists who identify as Black. And I could say, okay, I'm only going to buy art from these people. And so it's really exciting because we're able to kind of use these identity features that artists can opt into and then the mediums of art they work with to really target collectors and build those first relationships. And so that was like our first core feature, and just the fact that we had a way for people to cut through the noise to find artists they connect with who they could buy from. And like if I wanted to go and buy from like a Filipino artist, I could sort by Asian and like find that kind of creator. That's not something that you see on other platforms. It's something that's much harder. Like if I go on Instagram, I have to kind of work a little bit to see who's like a Filipino artist. They probably have to have I'm Filipino in their bio. I have to click in, I have to find it. So we're just finding ways to make that much easier. And so with that, we kind of built this brand on like inclusion and uplifting, marginalized artists. And it turns out that's a very easy community build. And it's also a very positive one because all the people we had early on in our journey and even to this day are people who believe in our brand and share our values, who see we're doing amazing things for artists. Since we've built this discovery tool where artists can opt into those features to connect with collectors, we've also been hosting technical and educational workshops. We've been providing free marketing materials, free educational resources and guides for artists, for art lovers. We have a book, How to Become an Art Collector. We write articles once a week through this newsletter called Creator Royalties, where we do deep dives, research, and mini masterclasses on different components in arts and technology. So we've done several articles on how to leverage AI as a creative tool. We do articles on what is a dynamic NFT, an artwork that changes on code depending on certain components, whether it's weather or location. And just we ask ourselves, kind of going back to the question I said, what do I want? How can I give it to other people? We wanted resources, we wanted education, we wanted opportunities. And so that's kind of exactly what we're doing at Hug, is we're taking those same resources that every artist would want and helping to give it to them much more readily. With Philippine Blockchain Week, what's really exciting is we are working with Philippine Blockchain Week to curate art for your digital art gallery during the event. And that's actually a big part of one way we uplift creators. We source exhibition opportunities, merchandising, and media appearances all over the world to share with the artists. And we do not charge our artists for the opportunity. A lot of traditional art galleries will say, if you make a sale, we're going to take 50% of your art. We don't do any of that. We strictly just want to help artists build their resume, to feel that recognition, to have their art loved by people who may not have been able to see their art without our help. And so for Philippine Blockchain Week, we're curating red, blue, yellow, and white art as a reflection of the Filipino flag. And I was like, I really want to share, it's an amazing flag. Like, one of the best flags, we have to admit. So I was like, we wanted to find an accessible way to share both Filipino culture and kind of values with a wider audience who may not be familiar with Filipino. So we thought through highlighting the colors of the flag, that'd be really exciting to curate for the gallery. Philippine Blockchain Week, super excited. We are currently curating that art now. We actually have our community vote on the art. We want to remove gatekeeping in the art so that, not just like traditional shepherds of art get to decide what is real art and who gets to say. So, if you go to like a traditional museum, you're going to have curators who have very high professional degrees from very fancy schools, and very fancy upbringings, which amazing. There's a time and a place for that, and they're doing amazing with their job. I'm not going to fault on it. But that said, we don't get the same representation of artists that we do see in Web3. We do not have those same gates and barriers in Web3, especially right now, that keep marginalized artists from being seen. And so how curation works at Hug is we'll kind of source these opportunities as we did a Philippine Blockchain Week. And anybody can submit, anybody can go to Hug and say, I want to share my art with Philippine Blockchain Week. I want to share it with this museum, with this gallery. I want a chance to be on this podcast. And we'll have artists submit their work. And then we actually have a community of curators who will vote on that work instead of just us deciding. So it's really exciting because then we'll have art, and I'll look at the art and I'll be like, okay, I love this one, I love this one, I love this one. But then the vote goes through and I don't get the final say. It's this wider community of we have like 7,000 official curators with our NFT pass, and we're looking to expand that past that. But we'll have people vote on it, and you'll be so surprised by these community curation exhibits. A traditional art exhibit, you'll just decide on a theme. You'll say, hey, okay, I'm going to do this exhibit on XYZ. And you kind of very intentionally build an exhibit based on a certain theme. But with these community curations, it's funny because you'll have kind of themes and metas emerge on their own. We did a general open call a few months ago for I think it was a gallery in Bali. I could be wrong. We do like a different gallery every week to really give our artists that opportunity. But all of the art that got chosen for this one gallery was purple, and there was no rule or indication that you had to vote for purple art, but it just happened to be of all the art that was submitted and art that got chosen, it all happened to be purple. And I was like, oh, this is really exciting. And I think that's something if you didn't invite your community in, and if you kept that kind of gatekeeping of the arts, you would not have fun experiences like that. So we're really trying to democratize and decentralize the arts so it's much more accessible to everybody.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love the way that you frame the work that you guys do at Hug. You're building the spaces, putting the resources together, putting the tools together, the very technical tools even, and the processes. It kind of speaks, I think, to your background, getting very technical concepts and communicating it to a non-technical audience. I relate as a journalist. The way I see our job is to speak to experts and be able to communicate their concepts to whatever the audience is, right? So I totally get where you're coming from there. And I just wanted to ask here, again, speaking to your background, when you are advocating or maybe championing NFTs and blockchain, I think anyone who works in a frontier technology, they need to do the kind of code switching work that you've done your whole life. Of this is where I'm coming from, this is where you're coming from. We got to be able to kind of bridge that gap. How do you communicate what an NFT is to an artist or digital artist who maybe has no background in NFTs?
So it's really interesting because like a lot of people who work in Web3, I kind of have two lives. I have people who are familiar with Web3, blockchain, and NFTs who are very excited. I don't have to explain anything to them. And then I have the rest of my life, the 95% of my life, people who have no idea what I do. And they desperately try to understand it because they can see, I have a lot of friends and family who can see I work in art. And they're like, we love that Tina finally works in art. She was in healthcare and marketing, and these very technical fields. Now she's in art, but I don't understand it. And so the way I like to look at it with the work I do at Hug, it's worth noting that for the uninitiated listening, Web3 is a very big umbrella. As we know, when we say Filipinos dominate every sector of Web3, that's a lot of sectors. There's blockchain gaming, there's crypto, token trading, coins, investing, which is very more traditional in terms of portfolio management, which is not my thing. Personally, coins, I'm oh gosh, that's not fun at all. It's not pretty. All those coins look the same. I like the art. And so I work specifically, in the NFT and arts ecosystem of Web3. And so when I'm talking to people, I really just like to explain that people have been making art since we've been people. Since we've had caves to paint on, since we've had outlets to channel our creativity into. Humans love art. Filipinos are a very creative people. We, art very much defines so much of our society. that whole side of myself, the creativity, it's all my Filipino side. No shade to my white side. But with that said, I like to explain when it comes to NFTs, it's digital art verified with code. And when you say it like that, it makes a lot more sense. Artists are able to put a watermark on their art. That's a very old practice. We see it on stock photography. We see it when artists sell prints or like have images on their website for sale. They'll put a watermark either blatantly or hidden and nested so they can always prove, hey, this art is mine. And if someone does, copy it, save it somewhere, try to post it as their own, they can say, listen, that has a watermark from me. It's on that to prove it's mine. When it comes to blockchain and digital art, it's just your original watermark written in code. So it's not even disrupting the art necessarily. You're just able to prove on blockchain through verified code, this is mine. This is the day it came into existence. Here's the journey it's made, which is another exciting component when it comes to the arts, because from a traditional art history perspective, there's a lot of art where we don't know what's happened to it. You have a war, you have political upset, you have economic uprisings, all kinds of tragedies, and art can get lost or shuffled, swapped with fakes. The real one goes missing, and we have no idea what happens to it. You have art that can disappear for decades and then manifest in someone's apartment, and major museums are like, what happened here? What is the story with this piece of art? And that's a problem we have with traditional physical art. But with blockchain, we know that journey. We know exactly where this art has traveled. We know exactly who's owned it and how long they owned it, and how who gave it to them and who they gave it to. Like, one of my favorite blockchain performance art pieces, there's this NFT called the Worm. And the concept of the worm is when I want to talk about digital art and blockchain, I like to bring up the worm. The worm is an NFT that you cannot sell, so you cannot make money off of it. The only thing you can do, as enforced by the code, is you can give it to somebody. You can send it to a friend, and that's what the code is. And you actually have a limited amount of time to send it, so it doesn't get stuck in someone's wallet. So I think it's after 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, someone can take that piece of art from your crypto wallet and bring it into theirs. But generally, it's about who sent the art to who. And so with the worm, what's really fascinating is travel through some of the biggest names in Web3, the biggest proponents, from Snowfro from Art Blocks to Snoop Dogg, Cosmo Medici, all these really big names in blockchain. And it's traveled to me. And like, me and my friends and the FOMO Party artist collective I mentioned earlier, when I got the worm and it was my turn to be a part of the story of this piece of digital art that I can never sell, I could only share it with my friends, and then on the code you can see everyone it's shared with. My friends and I hosted like a Twitter Spaces event where like the whole thing with the worm is they have like a performance art churchy kind of piece about it where they say all hail the worm, praise be to the worm. It's part of the bit. So we did like a little fake church event on Twitter Spaces. We were like, praise be to the worm, I'm sacrificing this to the worm, and I'm going to send the worm to my friend so and so. And the whole point of that, it wasn't to make money, it wasn't to get an investment, it was just to have this experience and have that experience documented anthropologically in code. And I think that is really exciting when it comes to an artist like selling their own work. Something really exciting we have done with Hug is if an artist connects the wallet that they sell their art through, and then we have users on the platform who connect to Hug, who've bought their art, we actually use blockchain to verify artist and collector mapping. So we're able to say, hey, Tina, I noticed you've collected art from this artist, so you're instantly going to follow them on Hug so you can see everything they're up to. And I don't have to do anything extra. If I've bought their art and it's in my wallet, the code on Hug says, okay, Tina's a collector, she wants to follow this artist, we know they already like them, and that's built in. And that's something you can't really do in Web2. You kind of have to curate. You have to find out, okay, Tina likes this art, so let's find all these artists, let's all figure it out. But with code, we're able to just support those relationships that already exist. And Something we like to talk about too, I work in marketing at Hug. So a lot of the lessons I partake on artists is I teach them about marketing. I teach them how they know more than they probably think they do. I just had a workshop last week to over 200 artists about how they can leverage social media and organic marketing to sell their work. And that's a really big lesson I take is you know more than you think you do. Believe me, when it comes to marketing your work, the hardest thing I teach artists is that social media is an organic outlet for artists to sell their work because it's free. But it's also worth noting that your time is valuable. So the time you spend on social media to promote your own art, like it's not necessarily truly free. Like it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of experimentation, of trying and failing, of being bold, of messaging strangers, of just putting stuff out there. It's already hard enough to be brave enough to make art, to share it in general. And it's just a lot of time and energy. So while we do teach at a Hug, while I do give them tools and advice on how do I build a marketing strategy as an independent artist? What messages do I want to communicate to my collectors? How can I find people who would resonate with the art I make and the different messages I'm trying to communicate? While we do try to empower artists with those lessons, we also want to provide solutions to the artists who do not have the time to invest for independent social media marketing. And so we really want to leverage the power of blockchain technology to help build those connections, to target people who are already collecting from you, who want to collect from you, and to leverage this new era of technology to build those relationships and build them even stronger than they could have been before.
Amazing. So Tina, in a couple of weeks, as you pointed out a couple times now, we'll be celebrating Philippine Blockchain Week. So we're very excited over here. And this year, local leadership is talking a lot about positioning the country as the blockchain capital of Asia. So that capitalizing on the thriving grassroots Web3 communities that we have here. So as part of that thrust, the government is also making really concerted efforts towards investing in the creative sector. So that's animators, game developers, performers, and also visual artists, digital artists. Now, I wanted to ask, maybe as we kind of wrap our time together here, why is it important to invest in creative communities? And what role do you see the Philippines playing in championing Web3 on the global stage?
So, as far as investing in creative communities, it really boils on the fact that we love art. Humans are creative. We're always chasing after art. And with that said, art is always undervalued. We can't live without it, but we fail to invest in it, not just as like societies, but just the entire world. Art defines every culture and every nation's history. We're able to look at paintings, at sculptures, at architecture, and say, this is who our people are, this is where they've been. And we're able to look back on that and really connect with it. But that said, we don't invest the financial and sentimental value and resources into creatives. So I think by investing in creatives, we're not just investing in art in general, we're investing in leadership. Because everybody loves art, everyone looks to creatives. It's why we go to movies. It's why we watch YouTube. It's why we read articles. That's why we follow journalists, because people who are creative, they're always going to have an outlet. And when you invest in creatives, you're going to invest in people who are in every outlet. So whether that's journalism, whether that's marketing, whether that's traditional art, whether that's digital art, whether that's architecture, but especially in this instance with blockchain, which is filled with creatives who aren't just creative art, but with technology, with code, with strategy, with business development, all these different outlets for creativity. If we invest in that, I think we really stand a chance for the Philippines to come out and truly be that global leader that we're already proving ourselves to be. Kind of circling back, I have a very unique experience. I acknowledge the fact that I'm Filipino-American. I grew up in this diaspora all over the world. And no matter where I went, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, there were always Filipinos there. We are a decentralized people. We're not scared of it. We know it's our superpower. We know that we can go out in the world and we can connect and build communities. It's something that I do as an individual, but it's also something that is just innate in who we are. And so by investing in creatives who have that kind of leadership, and by investing in blockchain, we can leverage the Filipinos that are already out there, that are already doing things, and just be loud and proud about who we are.
Awesome, Tina. Thank you so much for your time. I want to make sure that you get out of here before midnight there in New York. So thank you so much for joining.
It was a delight. Thank you so much, and I can't wait for Hug to have that art Philippine Blockchain Week. So proud of everything you guys are doing.